Hi everyone, welcome back to the Politics of Museums. In the first video, we talk about how museums shape the way we behave, how scholars like Tony Bennett, Reyyan'ın, Knell, and Carol Duncan showed us that museums are natural spaces. They discipline us through architecture, through knowledge, through ritual. If you haven't seen that one yet, I'd recommend starting there. Today, I want to take that a step further because if museums are powerful institutions, and we established that they are, then there's a big question we need to ask. Whose story is the museum actually telling? Because not anyone's story gets told, and that's not an accident. Let's start with the question. What is a nation exactly? The political theorist Benedict Anderson had a fascinating answer to that. He argued that nations are what he called imagined communities. Most citizens of a country will never meet each other, and yet they share a deep sense of belonging to the same we. That feeling doesn't just appear on its own, it's constructed. Now, Anderson identified three key tools that states use to build this sense of nationhood: the census, the map, and importantly for us, the museum. The museum particularly gives a nation a story. It organizes the past, presents a line of continuity from ancient ancestors to the present, and makes the nation feel natural, as if it has always existed, as if it was inevitable. And of course it wasn't, it was built. And that the museum is one of key places where that building happens. Building on that, Simon Knell takes these things a step further. He argues that national museums don't just inform, they perform. Like a stage, they use scenography, atmosphere, and carefully scripted narratives to produce the nation as something you can actually see and feel. And interestingly, even exhibitions that appear completely natural are still part of this performance. The choice to present something as objective is itself a choice. On top of that, Flora Kaplan adds another layer to this. She argues that museums work like civic classrooms. They teach citizens who they are through objects, through archaeology programs, through the very layout of their exhibition floors. You walk in as a visitor and you leave subtly having been taught something about what it means to belong. What I found most interesting about this is that a teaching rarely feels like teaching. It feels like simply looking at interesting objects. And that's precisely what makes it so effective. Now, this is where Stuart Hall becomes really essential. Hall's work on representation is something I keep coming back to because it gets at the heart of what we are talking about. Hall argues that representation is not simply a mirror of reality, it is the production of meaning. In other words, museums don't reflect the past, they actively construct it. Think about it this way. Every exhibition involves choices. What to include, what to leave out, how to label something, what story to frame around an object. And these choices are never innocent. They determine whose story becomes visible and whose remains invisible. So when we talk about national identity in museums, we are not talking about something fixed or natural. We are talking about something that is constantly being made and remade through selection, through narrative, through what Hall calls representation. Now, this is where things get uncomfortable. And I think it's important not to look away from this part. Annie Coombes shows us that museum pedagogy has not always been natural or benign. In the era of empire, museums and exhibitions actively work together to legitimize racial and cultural hierarchies, presenting them not as ideology but as science. African cultures, colonized people, and non-European histories were displayed in ways that made British and more broadly European superiority feel natural, rational, even inevitable. And here's the thing, this is not ancient history. The collections built during that period are still sitting in museums across Europe today, which means the question of who the museum speaks for is not just a historical question, it's a very present one. So, who does the museum speak for? Anderson shows us that museums help construct the nation as an imagined community. Building on that, Knell and Kaplan say that this construction is performed and taught. Furthermore, Hall claims that it works through representation, through selection, through exclusion. And finally, Coombes reminds us that this exclusion has a history, and that history has consequences. Museums speak for those whose stories have been chosen, and that choice has never been natural. In the next video, we will go deeper into exactly that, looking at post-colonial heritage, who controls the past, and what it means to demand it back. This is the politics of museums. If you have thoughts, questions, or disagreements, I want to hear them in the comments. Please subscribe, like, and comment. See you in the next one. Bye!